in concrete for your kind invitation. I think it's a very important place for electronic lutherie, even more since STEM center was closed, and so now I think this is the main center in Europe dedicated to electronic lutherie. So I hope a long future for this initiative. I will talk not only about my work in electronic lutherie in a retrospective way, but I want to begin and end with two different things that maybe can be even more interesting for the students than seeing examples in instrument making. I will start with a little reflection about how I think and I teach the creation process in any field of creation work should transit the different steps to make really an out-of-the-box thinking and results. Later will be the retrospective about instruments by itself, and at the end I will do an advance about my research, my theoric, and also in by the artistic practice research that is a thesaurus about all the different kinds and exhaustive revision about all the different kinds of relationships between signal inputs and responses. That is something that we deal with all the days as instruments makers, but maybe we don't make a further reflection in order to make different results. About the creation process, I'm convinced that it's necessary to split in three different moments. The idea moment, the process moment, and the work moment. This afternoon we have seen many idea and maybe yet prototyping steps on your work. So I think that is the most important is to complete in a deep way that first step, the idea step, before walking through the next ones. I think the also in composition and the same in electronic instruments making, I think that the idea is the complete sound image of the work or the complete idea free of limitations due to the technique. I think that idea exists in a complete and perfect way in the composer's or the inventor's mind. And that is an act of philosophy in the sense of poetic or musical reason. And in concrete, in Luthier, I think that would be very, very nice to deepen into two concepts. Start with a future synthesis, that is work or a task of thinking with no limitation of the techniques that are nowadays available. We can invent instruments that has a perspective of future, maybe of 50 years or 2 years or 3, because we expect some materials to be developed in certain time in certain lab. And backcasting, that is once we have imaginated any instrument that maybe today we can't complete in a physical way or in a working way, but we can live on plans, we have to do a backcasting process to have success in the process of instrument making. For example, I can think, I can imagine, as Enrique before said, an instrument that is played by the railways in a whole city. Why not? So I can do a backcasting to split into simple tasks. What are the steps that I have to go through to finally and successfully achieve that instrument? Later in the process time, we have to deal with certain software, hardware, materials, sound objects, recordings, and in concrete, in instrument making, is the time for first prototyping and then the subsequent steps or times for enhancing or making better or more detailed or less fileable the instrument. And the work time is when we have the final, not the prototype instrument. So the main idea is to work deeply. Never is enough in the idea step, because the technique can be made later or even by other people. That's not our creative task or work. Now we start the retrospective, and I would like to speak about what I feel that are my presents. We all know Lefterman, that yet in the very early 20th century invented that instrument that is played without being touched, and I think that is so out of the box thought, and it's difficult even nowadays with our technology to be over it, because it has a really beauty in its simplicity. I feel also as my president in second grade, here is the connection. This is an ancient Leon Terming and Michel Weiswitz in a photo taken by, what was his name? Frank Valdé in the Stein. And there also was where I studied some issues in instrument making. So that's the line or the affiliation I do myself with the first instruments makers. The way of my life since now in instrument making, it's a linear way from the concept of instrument as an object out of your body that makes some sound by its manipulation, to make it closer to the body or even inner to the body. Because I think that electronic music, that is fascinating, no? It's the music of our time, has this value about authenticity. If we see someone playing acoustic music, we feel as an authenticity check the player sweating or making a muscular effort that make us feel music as a truth. But in electronic music, the energy comes from the wall plug. So what I think that can palliate that lack of electronic music and save it as experienced by audience is to make it closely related to the body movement and functions and so on. So I started making fixed media electronics, and soon I started playing like laptop music while the dancers and the video players were playing in impros and so on. And soon I started investigating by myself in live circuitry and other practices, other proto-practices in Luthier, like circuit bending, hardware hacking, and so on. For example, I call live circuitry to close or attach electronic components in the moment of the concert. For example, there is an LDR that I live attached with the What you are seeing there are two pieces of can with a piece of foam, and that was attached live in the concert as other circuits. Later, I got a commission as instrument maker for an electronic opera called 12 Stones Ritual, that is a work by Diana Pérez Custodio. And for it, I had to invent 8 interactive devices that were reactive to different inputs, different physical inputs, such as body movement. That was this stone of the lost dance that consists in 6 infrared sensors around metallic structure, and it's reactive to the movement around it. Other one was reactive to liquid, because it was something like a dropper, a hospital dropper, that when the drop touched, closed the circuit, so it simply triggered whatever. It was significant because it was a work about all the kinds of pain. There was another instrument that is the stone with nails. It's a bent by design instrument because it's reactive at the same time to the humidity of the hands and also to the lights all around it. It has 12 LDRs and a lot of surface reactive to the conductivity of the hands. So it's nearly impossible to have certain sound result that is by itself interesting. With a little more light, you can see here the appearance of the instrument. And another one, the last one in this opera, was a fire reactive one that inside the theaters we weren't allowed to play with a literal fire. I don't know how's the term. So we had to do it with a heat pistol, like this kind. And it worked in a way, in a very long reactive curve of response, because the gesture was to unheat all the structure, all the metallic structure during 6 minutes, like a really sustained and slow way up. And I find interesting also in this instrument that the way down was the own dissipation, heat dissipation process of that structure. Making this way to the body, I also developed a device that was able to be attached to the body. In this case, it was conceived to be attached to the dancer's body, to different parts of the body. And this instrument is the magnetotaxic jaw, because it was thought to be put inside horse jaw, and was made to a concert called Formas de Amor by Mia, Diana Custodio and me, that was integrated by two works. One was Taukal Hamama, and the other one was Ostinati Amorosi. It was driven by a Hall effect sensor. So the pairing was with a strong magnet. Later, I made some instruments driven by bioinputs, such as animals, vegetables, and also using the sounds of the body as the neuronal signals and the heart beating and so on. For example, relative to vegetable-driven, this one that is an instrument made for my Electrónica opera Cosmovisión, that is driven by the touch to the branches of a moonflower plant.
que nos posee y nos llena de vida.
Also with triggered by vegetables. Maybe this is nowadays very common, but these are work of 2012 year. For example, the fructophone is an instrument that of which I have made 3 versions. This is the second one. That was driven by these long pins. Also, this is the third version that was driven by an axe, a little axe. And the worm phone, driven by snails or worms or marine worms, whatever is very conductive and moves a lot. So here the instrument interpreters are the living animals. There are different surfaces that are intercepted by the bodies. So that's the way it works. Those were marine worms that also were beating the fingers. Later, I invented some wearables. It's a term which you are familiar to. For example, the interactive apron made to the song of recollection and electro jota. It's some kind of folkloric electronic work. So there you can see that are two kinds of actuators. There is this in the center are 3 triggers, and this black band that's a continuous control by touch to make somehow melodies. This is a device made for dance and multimedia work by Olaf Keller called Don't Worry, Everything is Out of Control. So I made these surfaces somehow like electronic helmet and surfaces and a skirt that here is played by the dancer Carla Beal.
Isabel, un artista plástico. Nosotros, por el contrario, trabajamos con algo intangible. El sonido solo se puede escuchar. No lo vemos ni lo podemos tocar. Todo es...
And also this idea of surfaces is made here in a softer material for the Opera Cosmovision also.
Máquina. 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 Máquina.
This is another version in the same work of this instrument. But with different materials. The later one were flexible, and this one were laser cut steel scales with a scale form. Also, for different purpose of making concerts, I developed some interactive installation, such as the named hand program, that works by capacitive sensors that don't need to be touched with high sensitive surfaces.
Para el congreso de
That works like this.
Jueves 8, de 8 a 9. Cuaderno de haikus. Andrea Villarrubia, voz. La línea de la vida. Loris Moyo. Cada hombre, 18º ciclo de música contemporánea.
And this was worked as a prototype for a further one that was an homage to Marcel Duchamp at his 100th anniversary. That was a child, a small urinary, but with these reactive surfaces. Between 2017 and the 3 years after, I was centered in a cyber project that I named KitKit View. It was somehow an alter ego or a character that has this name and certain appearance that was due to just the devices she was wearing and the technical needs. So it was not a disguise, but a technical appearance. It's like a machine that has a transparent enclosure. So under this alter ego or aka, I made some works like this one that is Windows Sequetur 8 bits with sounds and visuals that were very retro or very low tech. Also with citations to arcade music. Also, that project that you saw before, was with this project, and also this one that I consider an important work, the Adonia Electrónica para Reyes Oteo, is a work with this cyborg kit view. So it consists on surfaces, conductive surfaces attached on the skin, to this part of the body and the arms, the forearms. And also to the front and to the crown. My latest interactive device or instrument was named by me as Alive Skin, and I feel that is a reaching point for me in this line I've traced in instrument making, because the instrument is the body by itself, without any kind of sensor involving on it. So it was a skin-to-skin, two-bodies device made for a work called Libro de la Ley that was premiered 3 months ago, more or less. That is a work by Juanjo Guillem and me. Oh my gosh. We can't see the short video, but we can see the instrument. And as an advance future in my artistic research, I want to expose here in a very brief way which is my current investigation, that is that I'm making a thesaurus about all the possible signals response relationships. As instrument makers, I think we usually think that we have some physical input, so some kind of physical change that we can measure or capture through a sensor, and we apply it as a continued control variation or as a trigger in a direct way, no, one-to-one to a sounding response. But I think we, as a collective, don't deepen enough in making this relationship other ways. For example, for one response that is a continued control, maybe we can cut it in 3 slices. That is what I made for this last instrument you have seen of the body and the skin and so on. We can slice it in 3 pieces and make three outputs relating to the different conductivities of the body. Or we can do to a continued control input, we can do a slice that is a continued control. When we reach the center, it's a keynote, is a trigger, digital output, and later more continued control, or even odd or absurd relationships that as one input and no output, or an output for no input. It's an exhaustive listing and thinking about all the possibilities in this relationship. So what I am making is a detailed approach to the various types of relationships between signal and response, with the purpose of putting all the options on the desk, not only the obvious. I think it's revolutionary for pushing the boundaries of thought when we are mapping choices. And I think it's necessary for enriching and diversifying the creative decisions in the practice of the electronic luthier and the electronic performer. And some of the chapters are listings about typologies based on the number and natures of signals and responses. Sorry. The different typologies according to the continuity of the response, the different typologies by semantic qualities of the sound content assigned to the response, and an effort of thinking some border typologies and odd and strange typologies of relationships, or even unuseful typologies. I'm also developing some electronic prosthetics in interactives, and making some wet lab investigation that now is trendy. So thanks for your attention, and if you want to do any question, or you have curiosity for anything in concrete, I will be happy to speak.
Questions? Somebody you want to ask for a question? Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Reyes, for the presentation. So it's really great to see how the various different approaches every artist, every creator, every luthier has to create the instrument, so we are quite happy to have all these different viewpoints here in our guest lectures, and it was quite enriching, I guess. So what I was thinking when I saw your presentation, because it was really great to see all your evolution of your own practice, that it seems that you had a phase where we were like really driven by testing different sensors, like environmental sensors, body sensors, wearable, interactive sensors, and so on, because this was the varying point in your work somehow. But then I was wondering, so there was also, of course, an instrument, an object around. For example, this light-resistive light instrument, it had this wireframe object around, and then you had this very abstract cube with the touch interaction, or you have your wearable costumes, which also have a certain aesthetic. So it didn't much elaborate on that part, on the physicality and the materiality of the objects around the technology you made. So maybe you can explain a bit what your approach to the materiality, the sculptural object, and the fashion aspect of the wearable device. But there seems to be a more continuous work you have. The technology is changing, but then the object and fashion.
Also the objects.
Yeah. So what is that part? The material, sculpture, and fashion, wearable, thing for you?
I've never thought about that because I only walk in dreams. I imagine and I make. So it's curious even for me to look back and see a line that makes sense, only sense to all the way. But well, I think that I used to make. I stay a long time by myself in my lab, without anyone. So I make a lot of testing and reflection about the properties of the materials. That's certain. In fact, I test lots and lots of materials that doesn't end up being an instrument because that doesn't work for me. As polymers or mixing glues with graphite powder, different kinds of glues, or grapheno. So I test the properties of many materials. I think to have on my desk, provided to my imagination more in a conceptual way, I investigate that the physical properties that can be translated into signals. Did I respond to your?
So maybe a question, because also like when you have an idea, because you said in the beginning is the idea, also the musical aspects of the work, and then you start implementing prototypes. No? So for example, when you have again these lights, one of the earlier works you showed this light-sensitive object. So of course in the nucleus of this instrument there's the light-sensitive circuits. But then what was first? Was it the sculptural object, like this wireframe object you made? Was it first and then you put the technology inside? Or was it that you had the light-sensitive circuit and then you put the object around it? So what is
Okay, thanks for your question because that is clear for me. I'm convinced that one should wish to be driven by the ideas and the poetic substract, and have the technical knowledge enough the way the technique can assist and or serve that poetic idea. So I think that recently, when I have more clear and more options in technique, I even do prototypes for one idea. I have seen in my dreams some instrument that works like that because has that meaning, that's a symbological meaning and is made for a specific work. musical work that I am composing, because there is one instrument for one work. That's important for me. Even my instrument has a number of opus, because I think they are music by themselves. When I dream about one instrument, I make different prototypes, so I can evaluate what's the best or the simplest or the less fileable technique to have it on stage. So I think it's first the idea, and technique is not the inspiration. I think the inspiration can be free or dreaming thinking.
I have a question about more about the technical part, because I understand that it's, for me it feels like you make work that applies very well to dance or to theater or like a hybrid of music and performance art. Initially, I can see the connection to Stein with the crackle box, with the touch-sensitive circuitries. So this is basically a battery-driven synthesizer, but the synthesizer goes through your body, right?
Yeah.
And in the later devices, I noticed that you use a huge amount of delay and reverbs in the sound, so that can never be the same circuitry. There is some after effects involved with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what was unclear for me is, are we dealing with a synthesizer or are we dealing with an interface? How can, when I see the later pieces, I don't understand where the sound comes from.
Ah, okay.
And in the beginning, the early ones, I understand it, because it's a synthesizer.
Yes, of course.
By wet fingers or dry fingers. So that for me that still has a connection with theremin, because it's the same family of instruments. And the later instruments have this. I would say it doesn't matter if it's an orange or if it's you or if it's a stone. Do you understand? Because
Yes, of course.
It's just a knob.
Yes, and yeah, it's very interesting, because it's an issue I think about usually when I am composing and instrument making. That is, and also I was speaking about that with Enrique, is the synchronization or the clear signal response or movement response evident for the audience, or if it's its relationship is somehow broken and is not so evident. So I'm convinced about that we have to escape from making a close relationship between the motion and the musical response. Because in that space is when poetry can happen. Otherwise, we have a science museum demonstration that is very pleasurable to the audience, but is dumb. I think it's only my opinion.
Question? To your latest plans now with the Thesaurus, that sounds very interesting to me. So that's a current ongoing research, as I understand. It's the Thesaurus book or collection you want to make, no? And we put up some rough topics, but do you maybe have an example of how that would look like? Like input and response lists you're going to make? Do you have a concrete example of how your complete list of tests?
Yes. I don't know if I have it right here. I am currently writing it. it's here. It's not the last version, but it can be. It's like any thesaurus is the most boring thing on earth because it consists on exhaustive lists. And I wrote an introduction and so on, an explication for non-instrument making of what is the path on instrument making, and there it starts one signal with a simple linear evolution, response in only one zone, one modulation. One zone, one modulation in one sense. No, more than one zone. One zone ratio, more than one modulations in two senses. Response in two zones. Response, two zones, two modulations in one sense. Two zones, more than one modulations in one sense. And so on, and so on, and so on. Additive, subtractive, additive, and subtractive in 3 segments, or and well, these are not complete in this version, but is a thesaurus with an utopical horizon of being very, very exhaustive. Yeah, it is.
So I would say that we give them a big applause and thank you very much.